Hi, pretty girl. Are you excited? You seem excited. Okay. She's like, well, you just got home and we had a walk, so I'm a happy girl. Yep, I'm sure you are a happy girl. So happy, pretty girl. And Mama has to record now. You can lay down and there's water over there if you need it. But I have to record. Pretty girl. Okay. Next Miyazaki movie. So this one is Castle in the Sky, which came out in 1986. Um, I mean, it could be seen as some connection to Nausicaa, given some of the things are, a little bit, similar. Times there is magic to a degree that is involved, or very advanced science and things like that. Um, Castle in the Sky is the first movie to actually be made under the title of Studio Ghibli. So it's after Studio Ghibli was fully formed. So, uh, hopefully this one won't be as long as the Nausicaa one. I hope. Good girl. You can lay down. You can lay down. We'll snuggle later. She's like, but I'm like pets now, Mama. Ayaz has big brown eyes. Ayaz be cute. Yes, you are very cute. So, I can pet you and talk at the same time, I guess. So, Castle in the Sky starts with kind of this probably very luxury cruise liner airship type thing, which I mean, we kind of had those when we had like dirigibles and stuff like that, and some airplanes can be very similar to that. And I have a very clicky girl in the background who's now laying on the floor. You could lay there, that's fine. And what happens is the airship is attacked by pirates. Those who are the important people that are on the airship are this girl whose name is Sheeta, and this guy whose name is Colonel Muska, along with like two of his goons. He works for the government, and the goons work for him. We kind of find out a little bit later on that he and the goons have essentially kidnapped Sheeta from her, from her farm where she comes from, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The plane, or the airliner cruise ship thing, is attacked by the Dola pirates, or the Dola gang as they are referred to as, and they are led by a woman named Dola, who's actually the mother of like three of the guys that are on the crew, and everybody, all the other guys that work on the crew kind of just refer to as either captain or mother depending on certain circumstances. And we find out later on that her husband is a mechanic. Love Dola, love Dola. I'm telling you right now, stuff that I found out while I was doing the research for this, Dola seems to be fairly well based on Miyazaki's actual mother. So, as in, she is an homage to Miyazaki's mother, which kind of gives you a insight about how Miyazaki was raised, I guess. But into the story, the pirates attack the airship, and Sheeta ends up actually taking up a bottle of what looks like a wine bottle or something, and like clubbing Muska over the head with it and like knocking him out. So good on her. Knocks him out, gets her necklace back. She has this necklace that she holds on to for a good chunk of the movie, and she puts that back on and she climbs out of the side of the airship. Now this thing is like hundreds of miles, possibly 1,000 miles up in the air. I don't know if we ever get the exact answer, but it's a very good distance up in the air. And she starts climbing along the side of it because she's trying to get into one of the other rooms, because if she can get to one of the other rooms, then maybe she can get to safety from the pirates and from Muska. During this time frame, the pirates have made their way onto the cruise ship, gotten past all the other very wealthy guests on the ship, and got to a, hallway gunfight with Muska and his group. And then Muska gets knocked out by Sheeta, and then Dola and like two of her sons are trying to get Sheeta to come back in from being on the outside of the plane, or the outside of the airship. Does not work. Sheeta falls, and just falls and falls and falls and falls. And once she's kind of out of sight of the airship, what happens is she kind of like passes out, because if I started falling off of an airship, I don't know if I'd pass out. I'd be like, it might be better if I'm passed out and unconscious before I hit the ground and, shatter every single one of my bones and die in the process. So, that might be the preferred thing, as opposed to, well, I'm falling and I'm probably going to die because I don't think I can lessen my trajectory at this point in time, or lessen my velocity. But the crystal on her necklace actually ends up glowing, seemingly coming to life, starts glowing, and then kind of just like makes her level out. And actually, instead of falling, I mean, she's still falling, but she's much more gently descending now, which leads us to this little town that is actually just called Sledge Ravine, or Ravine, depending on how you want to pronounce it, which is this little mining town kind of in the middle of nowhere within this country. And we are introduced to this kid whose name is Patsu, and he is actually kind of like the assistant slash just kind of, do what needs to be done errand boy type thing for like the guys that are like the local miners in the town that work in the mines themselves. Mining towns are very, very ubiquitous throughout most cultures. It's like wherever there was this large amount of some form of mineral, whether it be coal or gold or silver or iron, well, not iron, but like other things that can be turned into bronze and things like that. Metals that can be used in that type of stuff. There's, lots of towns that will build up over them, build up around the mines, because like the miners will come, and then either businesses will come to, be stores and places like that for the miners to be, and blah, 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 blah. And plus the miners will either bring their family with them or bring their family out after they've set up there, or they will get married and have children there. Basic history of how mines work. And then if the mine runs dry, then that's how you get ghost towns in a lot of cases. They're called boom towns, and they'll build up, and then as soon as whatever mineral is gone, the mine kind of the town just kind of dies, and people leave, or they stay in the town until they die. And we kind of find out that this town is kind of like, the mine is slowly running dry, or it's run almost dry anyway, so there's not a whole lot that the miners can actually do. I mean, like, they can work the mines, but if there's no mineral for them to sell, then they can't then they can't get paid very well. But Patsu is on his way back to the mine at night, and he looks up in the sky and he sees this light coming down, and as he gets closer, he realizes that there is this girl that is being literally like lowered down from the heavens over the mine. He runs over on this kind of overhang, a joint and pulley system that is part of the mine. He runs over to where that is, and he actually ends up, catching the girl. And as soon as like the crystal is no longer like holding her aloft, she is like very heavy instantly. He's usually like, oh my god, and he almost drops her again, but he saves her, and she ends up being okay, and he sets her down and lays her down, and then he ends up having to help his boss. Mr. Duffy is his name, and he's just like the big boss of the mine, kind of like the big boss of the town that everybody in town knows who he is, but he's like a nice guy. We see that much later on when he's very protective of Patsu and Shita and such later on in the movie, that they take very good care of, or that they will protect Patsu. And like this town will protect their own, because like they look after Patsu, because we find out very shortly that he's an orphan. But like they will look after Patsu and everything like that. And Patsu tries to tell his boss, but all of the pipes are just like going off, and like stuff is going off all over the mine, like stuff is falling apart, or it needs tightening or loosening or greasing, or they need to pull up the winch that had the elevator thing that has where all the other miners are, and the blah 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 blah. And so Patsu doesn't actually get the chance to tell anyone about the fact that he just found Shita falling from the sky. So after everybody else leaves, Patsu apparently takes Shita back to his house. How he gets her there and off this, winch and pulley system that they have there, I don't know. But he takes her home, and he does the polite thing. He sleeps on the floor, and he puts her in the bed. So the boy has good manners. Good Patsu. We also see that night that the Dola pirates at their group have been like flying over the valley, trying to see if they can spot anything that looks like where Shita may have landed, because Dola seems to have some idea that there is something valuable about the necklace, because we find out that Dola is able to like intercept military transmissions and is able to like decode and stuff like that pretty easily, because she's pretty smart about that stuff. Clearly she's been a pirate for a very long time and has, you know, worked on how to do that stuff. Her actually Dola being a slight inspiration for Big Mom from One Piece would not be surprising, but she is a much better parent than Big Mom is. Dola is a much better parent than Big Mom is. Well, she's a mother that is the head of a pirate crew that has a good chunk of her family working for her. So, I don't know. There's a comparison that can be made there. And they both have pink hair, because Dola has pink hair and Lin Lin has pink hair. So there's a comparison there. But back to Castle in the Sky. We get to the next morning. Patu wakes up. He goes out on his roof and he ends up playing the trumpet and letting his doves fly around and everything like that as he plays this trumpet over the valley. Whether or not he's supposed to be like the wake-up call for the valley, I don't know. I mean, probably a lot of the people in the valley could hear it because it would be like reverberating off the sides of the ravine valley that they are in. So maybe he can. Maybe they can hear him. Maybe they can't. I don't know. Come on, up here. Brenda, what you doing? Up. There, my pretty girl. There, my pretty girl. She's like, you're talking about a castle. Pet me. Yeah, I know. I'm talking about a castle. She's like, I want a castle. Actually, I want this house and I want you in it. I know. But Patu wakes up, plays the trumpet, and then Sheeta wakes up because she hears the trumpet. And she makes her way out onto the roof where she gets to meet Patsu and they introduce each other. And then he gives her bread to feed the pigeons or the doves or whatever that are there. And the birds just like flutter all around Sheeta and everything like that. And he's like, oh, good, you laugh like a human. You must, I thought you were an angel given how you came down from the sky. And she's like, what? And she's like, what do you mean I came down from the sky? And he's like, well, I think it was your necklace. And he ends up asking if he can borrow the necklace real quick. And Sheeta takes the necklace off, gives it to him. He tries putting it on. He needs help with the clasp, which is adorable. And, she helps get it clasped. And then he jumps off of his roof. And the crystal does not activate. And he falls through the brick floor roof of the other part of his house. You're too far away. You're harder to pet now. She's like, I don't care. Keep petting me. Yes, I know. And what ends up happening is, he crashes through the floor. She runs down to check on him, ends up kind of falling in too. And he's just like, yeah, it's fine. My head is like a cannonball. If it was any harder, you could use it as a cannonball. So he's hard-headed, as is most of the Ghibli guys. As are a lot of the Ghibli guys. Which is, Asbel's kind of hard-headed as well. But what ends up happening is they get back into the house, or they're already in the house, but Patu goes to start making them breakfast. And it's like, okay, another continuation of the fact of making food look delicious in Ghibli movies. There wasn't really a chance to point that out in Nausicaa. There wasn't really that in Nausicaa, but most of the other Ghibli movies have a fair amount of there's food in this that looks really good. I mean, anime does that really well anyway. Pixar kind of does that much more nowadays, but and Disney as well. I meant about other, Disney and anime does it too. But what ends up happening is, of course, Sheeta sees this picture on the wall, and she is like, oh, and it looks like there's this, it's Castle in the Sky, and it has the tag of Laputa, and Patu comes back and he's like, that's Laputa. My father took that picture of it one day when he was after he had come through this giant storm, and that was the only picture he could take. And everybody thinks he's crazy, or thought he was crazy, and that's what killed him. And Patu's dream is to finish building this plane, and then take the plane and go fly and to find Laputa and to prove that it exists. So that way he can prove to the world that his father was not crazy. And we see that, while his father may not have known too much about Laputa, we find out that there are legends about Laputa and stuff like that that have been around for a while. And, his father wrote notes about, what the city may have looked like, what the people may have looked like, things like that. So, again, the dad's world building in his own way, which is adorable. And then, before they can eat, there ends up being this automobile that pulls up that has Dola and several of the other pirates in it, although they don't look like pirates. They're all dressed like gentlemen and everything like that, so they at least get credit for that. And two of them go to look in on the kids, and Sheeta's like, oh no, those are pirates, and they're like, okay, and like Patsu puts her in a disguise, and they try to get out, or they try to get past the pirates, and Patsu like is being a smart aleck to the pirates, which is just adorable, and they get past one of the pirates, and then the other one is like, because the other one went around, like, checked inside the house and found Sheeta's dress. And was like, she's in disguise. Tell your mother. And Louis, who's one of the sons, is like, oh my God, she's in disguise. Go tell my mother. So, okay. I love the Dola gang, the Dola pirates, the Dola family, whatever you want to call them. I love them. They are great. And they themselves would be worth the watch of this movie, even if you don't care that much for like Sheeta and Patsu. They themselves are worth this movie. The family dynamic that they have is so funny, and I love it. Because Dola does love her sons very, very much. But she is also just like a very hard mother and everything like that on her children, and on her crew in general. But what ends up happening is Patsu and Sheeta make their way into town, where two of the other brothers are there trying to talk to the big boss, and they're just like, butting heads and everything like that. And then they realize, the other two pirates realize that, oh, though that's Sheeta, that's the girl we need. Patsu and Sheeta get to where the big boss is, where Mr. Duffy is, and it's like, Sheeta's in trouble. Pirates are after her. Okay, I don't know who this girl is, but sure, I'll help you because I know Patsu. And I love Duffy's wife, because what happens is Mr. Duffy is just like getting ready to square off against the pirates, and Patsu tries to stand up against them. The wife jumps out, pulls in not just their daughter, but also Sheeta, and then like 30 seconds later grabs Patsu and pulls him into the house. While Duffy and like the rest of the crowd are like building up around these like three pirate brothers. It's like, well, you came into our town and now you have to deal with us, type of a thing. You harassed one of our own. And so I love the wife. She's great. I don't think she ever gets it's like a kami or something like that. Is like the wife's name, and she's great. I think that's her name. I'm not sure. But she grabs little child Sheeta and then Patsu, and they're like, she's like, you take your friend, you take Sheeta, and you have to go and get out of town. So it's like they go, and then she stands in front of the door while the pirates are still out there talking to her husband with a frying pan in hand, and is ready to like whack them for any case that they try to get into the house, which is funny. And then we have a manly contest that happens because one of the brothers, I think it's Henry, I'm not sure, Charlie, I don't remember which one, but he, like, to show off how muscular and strong he is, he, like, flexes, and this makes all of the buttons on his shirt and suit pop and the shirt rip. And so it's just like we get that moment, and it's like narrated by one of the other brothers. And then Mr. Duffy, I'm sorry, the scene is so funny. And then Mr. Duffy is just like, oh, well, if that's what you can do, then okay. And he does the same thing and like flexes and just like shreds his shirt. And his wife is just like, I am not mending that for you. And then all of the two, Mr. Duffy and the other pirate, who I cannot remember which one it was. It's either Henry or Charlie, because I know Louis is one of the other ones, end up getting into a fist fight. And then this just results into like the whole town getting into a fist fight with the three pirate brothers, because it's just like, again, you showed up, you harassed Patsu and a young girl who done nothing to you, and then you get into a fight with our boss. So you're going to get beat up. They get into a fight. Dola and her group show up, and they look down, and she's like, oh, look at my little idiots getting into a fight. And then she sees that Patsu and Sheeta are sneaking away. And then Dola and her group inside of their automobile drive down, and they end up getting, they're just like, get in the car. And it's just like, but Sheeta's hiding in that house. So it's like, no, she's not. She got out the back, you idiots. Get in the car. And so, like, then they're, speeding through town, getting stuff thrown at them. And then she throws, like, a grenade at the villagers. And they run out of the way of the grenade, and they seem fine. Town doesn't seem to have experienced too much damage, but they definitely made sure the pirates know that they are not welcome in this town. And what ends up happening is, they're driving along, And while this is going on, Sheeta and Patu make their way down to the train tracks, where they end up hopping onto this little, coal mining train that's going the other way. That it's everybody in town pretty much knows who Patu is. And like, so he's, so the guy that the engineer on the train is like, yeah, get on and I'll try to help you. And like, they're trying to get away. And then they end up coming across the military. And the military is actually being led by Muska, or at least by one of the guys that was with Muska. And Sheeta recognizes him instantly. And then she tries to get away. While all this happened, they also get into a chase with Dola and her gang on the train tracks, which is just funny. Including with like several of the Sens hanging on the outside of the cars it's driving over the train tracks, which is just so funny. There ends up being this whole thing where part of the train track area where Sheeta and Patu are ends up collapsing, and they end up falling. And in the course of them falling, the necklace activates again, lights up, and Sheeta and Patu are then floating, and then they're slowly floating down to like the bottom, very, very bottom of the mine shaft area, within the ravine. And the military see this, as do Dola and her sons, who survive. Again, they get shot at and they run away, go into hiding. And from there, what ends up happening is Sheeta and Patu end up down into the mine themselves. And while they're there, they end up sitting and eating. And Sheeta ends up explaining that I'm actually from a place that's called Gondor, that's like this very northern area in the mountains. And that's where I lived until, and that's where I lived with my parents, and my parents died. And then the only thing that kept me going was the fact that I had the farm and my animals to take care of. And then, these men from the military showed up and they took me away and they brought me here. And then I managed to escape. And I don't remember if it's at this point in time or not, but I know at some point in time, Sheeta ends up telling Patu what her full name is. And it's like, Sheeta Laputa or something like that, where Laputa is part of her name. And so she's explaining that to Patu, and he's like, well, maybe your crystal has something to do with that. She's like, well, this crystal has been passed down in my family for a long time, and my grandmother taught me different types of spells I can say with it, a spell for hope, a spell for light, or for help, or for destruction, and things like that. And so, so she's talking to Patu, and while they're talking, there ends up being this old guy that lives down in the, within the mines, whose name is Uncle Palm, who ends up showing up, and he ends up interacting with Sheeta and Patu, and, he ends up showing them something about the mine. He tells them that the rocks have been very restless since last night. And they're like, how can the rocks be restless? And he has them turn off their light, or their little torch lantern. And all of the rocks slowly start glowing. So it's like what happens when you're like in a room full of like neon, and you turn off all the lights, and then the neon starts glowing all over the place. And it's like the crystals are glowing and the walls themselves are glowing, and it looks like you're standing in like the middle of like a solar system with all of these like what would look like stars up on the heavens, and everything looking down on you and all around you. And Uncle Palm explains it is this type of mineral that I cannot remember how they pronounced it in the movie, but it's this type of mineral that mankind used to know how to, purify and use. And, now there's not very much left of it in the rocks, but every time that Laputa seems to be over the top of the valley, they get a little more restless, or they seem to act up a little bit more. And Sheeta pulls out her necklace and shows it to him. And this actually kind of freaks out Uncle Palm a little bit. Rightfully so, given the fact that he seems to be able to like hear the rocks a little bit. And he like looks at it and he's like, that is like, I think it's like Ethereum is what they end up having it be called in like the English translation. I think there's like a slightly different setup for what they have it called, but I think it's Ethereum is I believe what it's referred to as within the English translation. And I think possibly also the Japanese as well. But he's like, the people of Laputa had been able to purify Ethereum, or mine Ethereum, and make it useful for them. And that's how they made their city float and how they fueled their empire. Also, at the beginning of the movie, after Sheeta falls, we get the, the introductory sequences of, kind of like the opening credits and everything like that, where we see all of these different, mythological type things and, gears and floating islands and all this other stuff that is there as well. That's a little bit like world building and stuff like that. And Uncle Palm actually asked Sheeta to put away the crystal because it's very loud and it's very sad from what it can tell him, from what he can understand from it. And she puts it away and she, like apologizes if it caused him any harm. And he's like, no, it's okay. It's a very good chunk of Ethereum and it can affect him a fair amount. So maybe that's a hint that he's maybe also a descendant of the people of Laputa, but we're not sure. And what ends up happening is Patu and Sheeta end up making their way out of the mine. They say goodbye to Uncle Palm and they make their way out and they end up looking up and they see this giant thing that looks like this, swirl of clouds. And they're like, well, maybe that's where Laputa is. And they're like, well, maybe. And then they end up getting, and like Patu was like, well, I'm gonna find my way to Laputa and I'm gonna prove that my father wasn't crazy and everything like that. He's like, I'm gonna do it. And Sheeta's like, okay. Sheeta's like, yeah, okay, we'll do that together. And this is, of course, when the military guys show up. They capture Sheeta and they knock out Patu and they capture both of them. They take them back to the military base. And while they're there, Patu is put into this cell, and then Sheeta is in this very, very nice room where they are clearly trying to bribe her. We see Muska talking with a bunch of these other, with this general and a bunch of other military people, and how it's basically explained that, like, while the general is technically in charge, Muska is technically in charge of all of this for this operation to try to find Laputa. And Muska is trying to use kind of, not quite coercion, but trying to convince Sheeta that he's trying to do what's right, and trying to do this for, like, the good of humanity, to try to find Laputa and try to get her to work with him. And he takes her, well, first of all, he tries bribing her with, like, very nice clothes and everything like that, which Sheeta wants nothing to do with. And then they go down into the base of this military base, where they find, into the bottom of it, where they find that there is this giant robot laying there on the ground that has been very badly broken, or partly badly broken up. Part of its arm is missing, and like one of its feet are knocked off. And Sheeta is looking over it and he's like, this fell from the sky, a little while ago, and we believe that it came from the castle Laputa, from Laputa. It just fell into a field. And that's, the military wants to find Laputa, and he's trying to explain, like, well, if the military finds Laputa, then they can use it to help, like, protect our country and for the good of our country and everything like that. Sheeta really doesn't have much interest in this, but he also says that, like, well, if you work with us, then we'll let Patu go. This leads to where Patu is released, and Sheeta kind of tries to get Patu to leave, and, Muska kind of, like, pays Patu some money, as like a compensation for the fact that he helped them and for the fact that they got chased and everything like that. He was, like, trying to protect Sheeta from the pirates and everything. Patu tries to find, makes his way back home. At one point, he tries to throw the money away, but he can't because, like, he's, he comes from a very poor valley, and he's probably quite poor himself. So that's even money that he still can't make himself get rid of. He gets back to his house, where he finds that the Dola gang have taken over his house and are just either eating him out of house and home because they're just gobbling down on all of this food, again, making food look delicious, or they went into town and raided the town and took food from the town. I don't know which. It's never explained. They just have a bunch of food. They tie Patu up, and Dola ends up kind of chastising Patu for, like, oh, well, they paid you to take, for, so you sold the girl to the government, eh, And Patu's like, no. And she's like, well, you ran away with your tail between your legs, which gets to Patu. And, Dola is like, Sheeta and I are a lot alike. And all the sons are like, Sheeta's gonna turn out like mom. It's kind of like their answer there, which is funny. What you listening to? That's grandma out in the hallway. It's okay. And what ends up happening is they end up, Dola intercepts another transmission stating that they figured out where, where Muska is, or like they're trying to get, they get some information that they're able to intersect, and then they're like, okay, well, this is where we're going to go now. And Patu is like, take me with you, so that way I can try to help Sheeta, because, I, I got her into this mess to a degree, and I went to save her, and she's my friend. And she's like, fine. And she's like, we leave in 1 minute. Also, we see this moment where she's just like going, eating ham on the food and everything like that, and just like ripping off a giant piece of meat with like her bare teeth, which is just funny. Dola's great. Again, I love Dola. And what ends up happening is, of course, Patu teams up with them, and they head off to go to try to find where Sheeta is. During this time frame, Sheeta is still stuck at the military base, and Muska has told her, try to remember any spells or anything like that that you can remember from your family, because he reveals that he knows who she is, what her actual name is, what is it? I think it's listed here somewhere, maybe. Toliupu Lushita Tole Tul Ul Laputa is like what her full name is, and it's hinted that is like, or it's stated later on in the movie that is like what the royal family of Laputa was called. That Sheeta is supposed to be this descendant of the royal family of Laputa, and would, by a technicality, be the princess of Laputa, given the circumstances. And the fact that she has this big piece of Ethereum with her is kind of like a, hi, my pretty girl, Yeah, you can look at me upside down. You're still a pretty girl. My Brenda. And during this time frame, Patu and the pirates are trying to make their way. Yeah, I'll scoot over here and pet you more. During this time frame, Patu and the pirates are making their way to where Sheeta is at the military base. Oh, that is not a good angle on me. There we go. We gotta get something to like scoot you over here, so that way you're closer to me while I'm doing this. There, that might work a little better. That work? Does that work for you? We can't have a chair big enough up here for the both of us to be on. I'm sorry, that does not work. She's like, I don't care. You pet me. That is the important thing. She does this to me while I'm working too. It's like, pet me. I'm cute. Yeah, I know. And what ends up happening is, Sheeta is actually in her room at the military base, and she actually ends up having this little flashback where she remembers, her grandmother and her grandmother teaching her like little spells and stuff like that, that can work with the crystal or so. And she just thought that they were little, just like cute little spells that her grandmother could teach her to help make her feel better. She ends up saying one, I don't remember which one it is, but she ends up saying one, and it activates the crystal, also activates the robot down at the bottom of the military base. During this time frame, the robot starts making its way up through the military base to try to get to where Sheeta is. I gotta let the dog out of the room. Hold on. And what ends up happening is, of course, the robot's making its way through the base to get to where Sheeta is, because its programming is to like protect the one that said the spell. From there, Patu and Dola and the gang are making their way to the military base. While this is happening, because of the fact that the robot is trying to work its way through the military base, it ends up actually blowing up some stuff in the process, plus the different guards and stuff like that are trying to attack the robot, and it's not making much of a difference for certain things. At one point, Patu ends up, or Dola gets knocked out by a flying piece of rubble, and Patu has to like fly the little firefly wing type ships that they have that are adorable. And Sheeta ends up at the top of this tower, Maiden at the top of the tower, and ends up actually having this little interaction with the robot where she realizes that it is trying to protect her. And while this is happening, she's trying to, she realizes that the robot is trying to protect her. And a bunch of the stuff in the base is on fire because they're trying to fight the robot and they're trying to fight the Dola gang at the same time. And of course, they're trying to protect Sheeta, and her necklace is still glowing. And of course, Muska needs the necklace and everything like that. And what ends up happening is the robot actually ends up kind of blowing up at one point in time, as it kind of like it pushes Sheeta so she's far enough away from it so it's not going to blow up and hurt her. And Patsu and Dola end up getting Sheeta. Unfortunately, her necklace ends up dropping, and Muska ends up finding the necklace in the rubble. And there's like this little beam of light pointing off from the necklace, and Sheeta saw where the beam of light was going as well. And oh, did you come back up? You can come in. Come on. Yeah, I know. And what ends up happening is, Sheeta is technically not really useful to the Dola gang now because she doesn't have the necklace, and Patsu saved Sheeta. But Sheeta and Patsu basically make the decision of like, we're going to go with Dola and the gang because we need to get to Laputa and we need to save it from whatever Muska's plans are. Also, there's a moment up on top of the roof with the robot where it's firing off lasers, and Sheeta actually jumps on top of the laser head of the robot to try to make it stop firing lasers, because while she's not necessarily the happiest with the military for the fact that they are part of the reason she is being held captive, she does not think that means that like all of these other random ruffian soldiers deserve to die or stuff like that, or deserve to have this happen to them. She doesn't think so. And as I said, Patsu and Dola are able to save her, and then as they're on their way back, by the valley, they're like, Dola's like, well, I can drop you off at the valley, and they're like, no, we're going to go to, we're going to come with you, and we're going to try to get to where Laputa is, and everything like that, and they make their way to the Dola gang ship, which is called the Tiger Moth, which is already a great name for a ship. And they get to the ship, and as they're roaming around on the ship, the Patsu and Sheeta get pulled in two different directions. Sheeta gets pulled into like the engine room, the cockpit, and like between Sheeta and Dola, and Sheeta, between Dola and Sheeta giving Dola the information she has about like where the crystal was pointing to, they're able to figure out like the best course that they need to take to try to get their way to where Laputa is, based on like the information from the crystal. And Dola is actually quite impressed with Sheeta's knowledge about like how like directions and everything like that, like Sheeta's navigational skills and stuff like that. She's actually quite impressed by that. While this is happening, Patsu gets dragged into another part of the Tiger Moth, where he is basically dropped off into the engine room by one of the sons, Louis, I believe, drops him in the engine room with the guy that is their mechanic / father, who is Dola's husband. And so like she's dropped in there, and Patsu is dropped there with him. And again, he's like proving that he does know his way around machinery and everything like that, which makes, I don't remember if he ever actually gets a name. I don't remember if the dad of, if Dola's husband actually gets a name. I don't know if I ever realized that before, that he didn't have a name. I know several of the sons have names. There's like Charles and Louis and Henry, and Dola, obviously, and I think some of the other side guys on the crew maybe have names, but I'm not sure. But there's also this other adorable moment when they're flying back to the Tiger Moth, where like Sheeta is, of course, crying because, of course, everything that just happened at the Marine base. And one of the other pirates is like, Sheeta, if I did anything to upset you, I'm sorry. Which is just like, okay, well, they are pirates. Their mother at least instilled some form of manners in them, okay? That's at least something. Which leads into stuff in a moment. But, so Patsu is situated in the mechanics area and everything like that, in the engine. And then Sheeta ends up getting taken into Dola's room. And Dola's like, well, you better start practicing your pirate speak. And Sheeta's like, okay, I will. Arg. And Dola goes, keep practicing, which I love. As I said, even if you just want to watch the scenes that have Dola and her sons in them, they are so funny, and I love them. I love this movie in general. Pretty much every Miyazaki movie I love. Hi. Brenda's like, hi, I is here. You will pet me. She licked my elbow to get my attention. Good girl. Good girl. You're a good girl. And what ends up happening is Patsu Patsu is there. Dola ends up giving Sheeta a whole bunch of new outfit that's much better for being up in the air. And so they both have to kind of get like their sea legs. Both kids have to kind of get like their sky legs, I guess would be the way of putting it. And we also see this portrait of Dola when she's like a younger girl, and she looks a lot like Sheeta because they both have pigtails, and Dola still has pigtails. And then Dola puts Sheeta into the kitchen. And it's like, okay, this kitchen needs to be cleaned and shipshape in about an hour, and then we're gonna have to have food. And so Sheeta is just left in this kitchen that looks like it hasn't been cleaned in months. And so she starts working on that, and then we cut to where Patsu is helping helping with the engine and everything like that. And then one of the sons, I think it's Henry or Louis, who's kind of the main son that we kind of see a little bit more. He makes his way into the kitchen, and he offers to help Sheeta, and he's clearly there trying to like flirt with her, which is adorable. And then there's like one of the other guys that's in there that's like helping Sheeta with cooking already, and he's just like in the corner peeling potatoes, and Louis like, what are you doing here? Helping. And it just ends up with all of the sons, and I think like two of the other crewmen in the kitchen with Sheeta trying to help her cook. And like just like falling in the door, just like all of them falling all over each other to try to help Sheeta and try to impress her, which is just funny. And then of course Sheeta makes dinner, and they're all just like, they're all, all the boys are just like loving all the food and everything like that. And we see Dola like and her husband having like a chess match, and the husband's like, this is very different for you, dear, to have them on the ship. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're not normally this nice. She's like, I can be nice. And she's like, I'm just doing it so I can get the treasure. And he's like, sure you are. Checkmate. And so then we have that night, and it's Patsu ends up getting put up as a lookout because they do rotations where certain people are lookouts at certain times of day, and certain ones have to be there at night to do lookout there. Hi, that's a good spot for you to rest your head, and I can pet you there. That works. She has her head on my good Brenda. And what ends up happening is Patsu ends up being up on lookout, and Sheeta ends up making her way up there as well. Sheeta was actually, Patsu was in like the dorm room with like all of the other guys, like the bunkhouse type setup with the other guys. And then Sheeta was actually in Dola's room with her. And what ends up happening is Sheeta and Patsu are now sitting up in the crow's nest, and there's actually kind of like, it's basically, whoa. Don't move my chair. There's okay, the thing that you would make when you were kids with like a can on one end and a can on the other end and a string in the middle, and you could talk into the can and you could hear your friend on the other end of the line, that type of thing. They have stuff like that, but they're like systems all over the ship, so they can like talk with each other and like loudspeaker all over the ship and stuff like that. And what ends up happening is, so Dola is actually listening in on the conversation that Sheeta and Patsu are having on top of the tent, or having on top of this balloon, or on top of the ship. And Sheeta is like, I'm scared beyond words. The truth is, I don't want to go to Laputa at all, and I hope the Goliath beats us to it. Because the Goliath is like this giant ship that the military have. And Patsu is like, what? And Sheeta's like, there are just too many there are just too many strange and powerful things that are on Laputa that the military can get their hands on. Hi. Can you make up your mind? That is a door. I am over here. Reach. Reach for the Brenda. And okay, if you sit there, then I can pet you. Does that work for you? She's like, he's good enough. And what ends up happening is, so Sheeta and Patu are having this conversation, and Sheeta is explaining her fears, and she's like, I didn't lie to Dola about where we're going. I gave her the right information. I'm just worried about what we'll find at Laputa. And then she also mentions that there was this spell that her grandmother taught her that was the spell of destruction that could be used to just like destroy everything, I guess, or like could be like this spell that could be used with the crystal that could cause a lot of harm. And she doesn't want to hear it. And during, she doesn't want to use it. And during this time frame, Dola is like listening in on the conversation. So Dola is getting a lot of this information. While Patu and Sheeta are just like up there talking and bonding and like snuggled into the crow's nest with like a blanket around them, which is adorable. They end up then spotting the Goliath underneath them. And Patu and Sheeta end up actually in this kind of like kite setup that the crow's nest can turn into like this kind of like little kite vehicle. And they end up in that. And Dola is actually like, Sheeta, you better come back down here. That's man's work. And she's like, but you're a woman. And you're the captain of this damn ship. And Dola's like, fine. And like, there's just other little funny moments that happen during that time frame that I love those guys for. And they end up, during this whole time frame, they end up getting to this kind of this chase / shootout thing with the Goliath and the military and Muska and everything. And Muska is still following the light from the pendant and everything like that. So they're they're all trying to make their way to Laputa. And during this time frame, Sheeta and Patu ends up being this moment where Patu and Sheeta end up in this kind of like hurricane setup that's like kind of like an eye of a hurricane set up around where Laputa is. And they're like, oh, if we get to the other side of those clouds, if we get through the storm, then we can get to Laputa. And they do get through the storm, and Patu sees like this, ghostly apparition that, reminds him of his father and everything. And they get through the clouds and they get to where Laputa is. And we get this, big reveal of what Laputa looks like and how beautiful and amazing and large it is. And like, it's like Atlantis in the sky and everything like that. And it's gorgeous. And there's like trees all over the place and pools and giant castle like sculptures and structures and everything like that all over the place. And Sheeta and Patu end up, their little kite thing kind of crashes a little bit onto part of one of the upper and outer areas of the castle, and they wake up and they find out that they're okay, thankfully. And while they're there, they realize that they are on Laputa, and that they're all, they're very happy and they're alive. And they're like, okay, we're okay. And we're on Laputa and it's real. And they're like just so overjoyed. And then there's this robot that makes its way over to where they are. And they think, or Sheeta thinks that it might be trying to attack them or something, or they're worried that it might attack them, which is understandable given the last interaction that they had with the robot. And at the moment, Sheeta does not have the crystal with her. And the robot just gently picks up the kite thing and moves it away, and it's revealed that there's a bird's nest, and that this robot just kind of helps take care of these birds and takes care of the animals. And then they follow the robot into the inner part of the giant section of Laputa. And while they're there, they end up finding this huge tree in the middle of it that has to be like over 1,000 years old, that is very much part of this building at this point in time. And we also see that, like, from the inside out, it looks like doesn't look like there's actually any walls in the building. It just looks out and you can just see sky. So it's like this kind of like reverse style of a greenhouse. And what ends up happening is, as they're roaming around, they see all of these different animals that are there, and they see fox squirrels later on, which is a callback to Nausicaa, and they're adorable, and I still want one. And other little animals all over the place, and birds and everything. And they end up getting to where the giant tree is, and they see that there's like this carved like marble or obsidian type structure there that was carved, and they can't read what it says, but they can tell that it might be like a memorial or something like that to the people that had lived on Laputa. And then they end up seeing that there's this other robot there that is like always like eternally a sentry guarding this monument, and it's like stuck in the ground. And then there's the other robot that they did talk, or that they kind of interacted with already, and it brings flowers to the little, to the grave. And it has this cute little interaction with Patsu and Sheeta. And then there ends up being this explosion, and they realize, okay, the military is here, and they find their way outside, and they look down and they see that the Goliath has arrived, and that they have the Tiger Moth and Dola's gang hostage and everything. And during this time frame, we end up having it that, like, Muska kind of goes off on his own with his little goons, and the general is going through and like just gathering up all of these different treasures and everything like that to put onto the ship, because then they can use the treasure and everything like that, which is generally one of the things that does tend to happen whenever archaeologists or governments or whatever find a bunch of this stuff. At that point in time, they're not, at this point in time, the government in this country, for the country that Muska and such are from, aren't particularly worried about like preserving things. And Muska is trying to make his way through the castle, and Sheeta and Patsu are trying to make their way over to where they can get to where Dola and the boys are, so that way they can save them. And they end up getting separated. Patsu is climbing up to try to get to where Dola and the gang are, and Sheeta ends up actually getting grabbed by Muska and his goons and gets taken as hostage. And Muska is making his way through the castle using the crystal as a key to get through different doors and stuff like that. And, so that's happening, and Patsu gets shot at, and he gets like this little cut on his cheek, and he does manage to get to where Dola and the boys are. Aw, did you get your squeaks? Did you get squeaks? Yeah, you did. You had your squeaks. I can't say I'm almost done, but okay, fine. You can have that for the moment. We'll see how annoying it is in the background. And what ends up happening is Patsu ends up, cutting Dola free and giving her this knife so she can try to get out and everything like that and get the rest of her. Okay, that's not a right now thing. That's not a right now thing. You can, no. If you are quiet, you can have this. That is not quiet. That is squeaks. No, give. No. You can have it back when I'm done. I promise. It's the same deal we make when I work. You can have it back when I'm done. I know. You're very cute. She'll get it back when I'm done. When I'm done with this, I promise. And what ends up happening is Dola also gives Patsu this little, this gun that can shoot off. I don't know exactly what kind of bullets they are, but they're like some kind of like more like explosive bullets, and he can use that to try to get to where Sheeta is. So he's climbing his way through the building and everything like that, making his way through the castle, and climbing on the outside of it and on the vines and on the trunks of the trees and everything like that. That's all over the place, that are just like, as Muska says, infested the entire castle and everything like that. And during this time frame, Muska is making his way through Laputa with Sheeta, and is using the crystal to get through the different doors. And they end up making their way to, he's like, well, yes, there's treasure here on Laputa, and while that is valuable, it pales in comparison to how valuable the knowledge that is held within Laputa for their science and their machinery and everything like that. And his goal is to find that information. And between, using his knowledge and stuff like that he has, because he's probably been obsessed with Laputa and knowledge about Laputa for a very long time, he makes his way into the control room with Sheeta, or what would be kind of somewhat of the control room, because there's this giant Ethereum crystal there. And he ends up using the power of the crystal and the power of Laputa to, basically ends up resulting in him releasing this giant laser, which demonstrates the power that Laputa is capable of. And then he also ends up basically dropping the general along with a whole bunch of the other soldiers out of the bottom of Laputa, and they fall to their deaths probably pretty quickly. And then any of the other soldiers trying to escape, he then sends all of these other robots that have been dormant for the past 700 years, sends them out through the castle to get to the other soldiers and to get them off. Also drops a bunch of them out of the bottom of Laputa in order to have them attack Goliath, and Goliath ends up getting blown up. During this time frame, Dola and her gang are like hiding within their little ship while they're waiting for Sheeta and Patsu to show up. And Sheeta tries to stop Muska at first before he can kill the military guys, and that doesn't really end up going very well. And Muska reveals that he is actually Romska Polo Ul Laputa, that he is also a member of the Laputa royal family, and that he is technically should be the king of Laputa in his regard. In his opinion of the matter, he should be king. And what ends up happening is, of course, he is, trying to use this power because it's like, oh, he can use this power to control the world and everything like that. That's all this power within Laputa. He can use that to his own means, his own ends. And Sheeta tries to stop him. She ends up getting a hold of the crystal and is running through the castle with it, trying to get away from Muska. She ends up finding Patsu, and she gives Patsu the crystal to try to get Patsu to get away and to tell Patsu to go and throw the crystal into the ocean. So that way, Muska can't control the castle anymore. And what ends up happening is, Muska ends up having Sheeta at like gunpoint within the throne room, and he shoots off both of her ponytails during this process, which she barely flinches while all of that is going on. And Patsu shows up, and he makes this deal that he will give Muska the crystal as long as he's allowed to talk to Sheeta. And Muska allows this because he thinks he's the one that's in control here. And Patsu goes over to Sheeta and he tells her, "Put your hand in mine and tell me the spell of destruction." And she sees that he has the crystal, and she does that, and she whispers the spell of destruction to him, and he says, "It's okay, Dola and the boys are safe." And then together they end up saying the spell of destruction to activate that part of the crystal, which then results in Laputa basically, part of it exploding and parts of it crumbling away, where just so much of like all of that knowledge is lost, and Muska ends up, of course, falling to his own death, being crushed, take your pick, but it just gets destroyed. And Sheeta had actually told Muska when they gotten trapped in the throne room, or when they were in the throne room, this is no longer a throne room. This will be a tomb for the both of us. And I realize now why the people of Laputa abandoned Laputa in the first place. It was because they had realized that while they had all of this stuff, all of this knowledge and everything like that, they weren't happy, and that's why they left Laputa. And that's why they went down to, Earth itself, down to the surface, and, lived there instead. And of course, Muska thinks she's crazy, because why would anybody want to give up all of this power? Again, shows who should be in charge there. And, so Laputa is just kind of crumbling all over the place. Dola and her, and the family, the gang, end up escaping, and they're on their little firefly hover cart thingies. And she's like, they must have used the spell of destruction, because she knows about it, because she listened in on them talking. And, they're all worried about Patsu and Sheeta, and they end up looking up, and part of the castle survives, because there's the part of the castle that was kind of like the garden. It survives, as does, I think, the giant crystal that was there in the first place. I think it survived as well, and it has now locked itself within the roots of the giant tree. And we also see that the kite is safe, and that Sheeta and Patsu are okay, and they're like, the tree must have protected us because we protected the tree, because they're, kind of being held within the roots of the tree, so that way they can't fall. And they end up, they get back on the kite, and they sail off, and they, kind of glide up, and they see that you know, the original robot that they interacted with, that it's okay, as is are the little animals that were up there. So part of the castle is still fine. The part of it that was the garden and stuff is still okay. And it's like, it's free instead of being burned down by the other stuff. And Patu and Cheetah fly their way back to where Dola and the gang are. And Dola ends up hugging Cheetah, and she's like, "Oh, you got your ponytail shot off. That's the worst." And she's like, "Yeah, not like getting your eye poked out. What do you have in there?" And she's, you know, Dola reveals that they have these jewels, and like everybody reveals that they have all of this, you know, jewels and gold and rings and everything like that. And like their ship got blown up, unfortunately, but Dola will buy her husband a new one. And so they have that, and what ends up happening is, you know, so Dola and the gang are all happy, and Cheetah and Patu are okay, and they're all happy that Cheetah and Patu are safe. And you know, Patu and Cheetah end up, you know, they head off on their own. They take the kite, and they're going to fly back to the valley where Patu is from, to the ravine there, where he's from. And, you know, Dola and the gang will probably, you know, be ready to go off and buy a new ship, build a new ship, however it ends up going. And one of the pirates is like, "Well, all good pirates listen to their mother." And then I'm like, and I thought about One Piece, and I'm like, how many of the Straw Hats listen to their mothers? And I'm like, don't know, probably dead, definitely dead, dead, dead. Well, kind of dead as a doctor, dead. Abandoned him, most likely dead, definitely dead, don't know. And I'm like, I don't know, does that apply to One Piece as well, that all good pirates listen to their mothers? I don't know. I'm quite certain that, you know, Oda has probably seen a good chunk of the Hayao Miyazaki movies to some degree and taken some inspiration from them at times, I would assume. But possibly not anything major, at least not anything exceedingly noticeable, beyond the fact that both Dola and Big Mom are pirates that have big families, and they both have pink hair and somewhat big noses, which is just funny. And they like food. There's got to be a comparison there. I'm sure there is. But there has to be. But, you know, so Cheetah and Patu, we get like the little end credit sequence, but there's not really too much. It's like Cheetah and Patu go home, and then there's, you know, the Dola gang head off on their own and everything, and, you know, they all, you know, part happily and everything like that. And we see the end bits is just like the last bit of Laputa is like floating up higher and higher, and we see it just like floating above the earth. And I'm like, okay, I don't think it's in the atmosphere anymore. But it might be being held alive because of the magic from the crystal. I'm not sure. I don't know, but I love Castle in the Sky. In regards to the cast, because that's the last little bit that we have here, there were several iterations of this. There was, of course, the original Japanese in 1986, and then there's, of course, one that they did that was another an English dubbing of it that was in 1988, and then of course this one for the English dub that I'm kind of more that I'm more aware of is from 2003, which I probably saw Castle in the Sky at some point in time. You know, I would have been middle school at that point in time. But in regard to the cast, Patu is voiced by James Van Der Beek, which is I think he's from Dawson's Creek. Don't quote me on that. And then we have Cheetah is played by Anna Paquin, which is why I have an X-Men shirt on here, and I have Rogue over here in the corner because she plays Rogue in X-Men. And there's rumors that she might be coming back for Deadpool 3, which is perfectly fine in my opinion. And then we have Cloris Leachman, amazingly as Dola, who could cosplay as Dola if she ever wanted to. Rest in peace, Cloris Leachman. We have Mark Hamill as Muska, so he gets to play a full-on villain there, and he loves playing villains. And there's not really too many else. The other one that you might recognize is Mandy Patinkin plays Louis, who's of course one of the main sons. He is, of course, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Which now gives us 2 movies in a row that have people that were in The Princess Bride in them, because previously we had Chris Sanderson in Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, who plays oh, what is this? He Takatoa or whatever thing plays him in that, but he's also Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride. I love The Princess Bride. What can I say? And then now we have Inigo Montoya in this one. And then, of course, later on, we have Carrie Elwes plays the Baron in A Whisper of the Heart and Cat Returns when I get to those ones later on. But there's so many different people that are in these movies, and I love how they get big names and there's just like slightly other smaller names doing other characters in the movie, and they're great. Tress MacNeille is also in this as well, who's been in several other things, as is Jim Cummings and everything like that. So there's like this great connection there between a bunch of those other ones there. So that's what we have there. I thank you for watching this. The next one up, I believe, I think it's My Neighbor Totoro, and then it's Grave of the Fireflies, because I do believe My Neighbor Totoro came out first, and then Grave of the Fireflies came out. They were in production at the same time, but I believe Totoro came out first. I believe so. But I'm doing these in the order that they originally came out in the Japanese. So I believe it should be Totoro next. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!